Either you're hearing the ghosts in my apartment or there's some other noise on the line.
The ex-murderer. What is that in the cabinet behind you, JM?
Thank you. Well, you both a great podcast, and you saved my life. That's amazing. I have a body to clean up, but that's a good outcome of What's Your Baseline.
Here you go. Here you go.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast. In this show, we talk about our experiences and lessons learned in enterprise architecture and business process management. What's Your Baseline is designed to be for everyone. Newbies who are just getting started with these topics, organizations who want to improve their EA and BPM groups and the value they get from it, as well as practitioners who want to get a different perspective and care about the discipline.
Each episode will tackle different key topics, providing context, background, best practices, and stories from the road, inviting you to learn from our challenges and successes, and demonstrating key tools to help you set up your practice and get the most out of it.
I'm your host, Roland Wolt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlinson.
Hey, JM, how are you doing?
Not too bad, Roland. How are you today?
I'm super excited today because, if you haven't noticed that, this is episode 1 of season 4. Can you believe it?
Man, when we started making this, I thought, well, let's just see how long this goes. And boy, it's been an incredible experience. I'm so glad we're starting season 4. Oh, Roland, I'm so happy to be doing things with you. This is really fun. And I'm really glad also for our audience. We've got such amazing people who are listening to our episodes, who are giving us fantastic feedback. So thank you to everyone out there. You made 4 seasons, well, 3 seasons and a 4th starting happen. So thank you very much for being here along with us on this ride.
Well, without going too much into the bromance, let me just say, JM, I enjoy our calls as well. So it's all good. But I like to talk with you about a topic that I know that you have a little bit of experience, I think like 10 or 12 years or so about. And that is solution engineering. Have you heard that term before?
Yes, I have. And it's funny. I've heard that term. I've talked about that term. People I know talk about that term all the time. I feel like it's not as well known in the market. And it's kind of all lumped together with this idea of technology consulting. Mm-hmm. So we sat together and said, listen, we should probably clear this up. And I think today's episode is a really good example of one of the things we love to do here on What's Your Baseline, which is explain some industry terms, help you get to the root of sort of what they actually do, what they mean, and how to work with them. So if you're a solution engineer or consultant, welcome to a little bit of a mirror on what we think your life might be, and or from our experience what our lives were. And if you aren't a solution engineer or consultant, well, let us explain to you a little bit more about who they are, what they do, and what resources they need, and how you can get the most out of your solution engineer or your consultant.
Absolutely. And they live in fancy schmancy hotels, on the client's dimes, London, Rio, Tokyo, all those things I heard.
London, Rio, Tokyo, Holiday Inn Express. I think that's how it works.
You're so classy, JM. You're so classy.
Listen, the client's paying. They're going to ask for you to stay where it's an appropriate amount for the expense report.
Oh, gee. Well, I'm pretty sure we will not see those times again. Not that you will stay in the luxury hotels in those 3 cities, but I guess after Corona is finally over, I'm pretty sure we won't go back to what we've seen pre-Corona. The Monday to the airport and Thursday, Friday coming back home. I think those times are over.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And actually, before we start, that's a very important point about how people interact. I really do believe there's something that can't really be described about a physical interaction. Mm-hmm. 2 or more human beings trusting each other through mutual experience in person. But if there's anything that Corona has taught us, it is that a lot of the crux of the knowledge sharing, best practice dissemination, the consulting and analysis, the ability to support decision making, a lot of that can be done through remote hybrid working situations. And I think that it's all better for everyone. We burn less fuel. We burn fewer hours in the nights and weekends. I mean, geez, I know you fly on the weekends as well as I do. And we have longer and happier lives when we're able to do more of our work from where we are rather than having to go across the world to make that work come to life. So picking your moments, but if possible, staying home as much as we can.
Well, even though I don't want to spill the beans, but this is obviously like almost everything in technology. a job where you need to work with people, right?
Yeah.
And even maybe more so than in others. But before we get started, and I will ask you the first question, just a little reminder, we did a couple of shows that already have spoken about how to work in the sales process. Remember, JM, we did that wonderful, what's your baseline, what's a good shorts, what's a good POC, POV, and I think it's in the same vein here. So let's get started. JM, what is a solution engineer? What's the job of a solution engineer? If you want to start with explanations.
Absolutely. So we're going to go through our normal acts, but this time we're going to try and define these roles and get a little bit more specific about what they are. And we'll start with solution engineer as sort of the opposite being the consultant, or something tangentially a little bit to the being the consultant. So what is a solution engineer? Typically, a solution engineer is your technical sales specialist. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why there's another word for it you might see called pre-sales. Pre-sales is often a word that not only describes the role, but also the scope of involvement. It's not entirely true. There's some moments where you might be involved at different parts of a deal cycle that is not just the pre-sale. Things like ongoing client support, or the expansion of opportunities when you're looking at new business lines or new use cases, or generalized best practice sharing and dissemination support for socialization within the client. But generally, solution engineering is pre-sales. So as a technical sales specialist, they do a lot of things around understanding client needs before they purchase technology or solutions. They're all about digging into what is the pain, what are we talked about this in the value proposition a little bit. What are the challenges that you're having that won't let you achieve your business initiatives? And how does technology, and often solution engineers will be working for a technology sales organization. That's a very common place you'll find them. How does the technology that they represent for help to enable your initiatives to overcome those challenges? So they're making those connections with the clients or prospects, I suppose, of a technology sales organization. That's something that they're quite adept with. They are all about very quickly analyzing, where are you struggling? Where have you done this before? Where has it not worked? And how can what we do change your stars? Is that something you see as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's also interesting to see that there's a bandwidth of how pre-sales roles will be seen. Some salespeople think, oh, those are the demo jockeys, who just demonstrate the tool. But a good solution engineer, in my opinion, is actually doing way more. And you haven't mentioned that. That's the person who actually engineers the solution for the client. Right? That sounds obvious, but at the end of the day, you want to convince your customer to buy whatever you have to offer in the configuration that they need for their problem. And that is something that some salespeople always like to forget, because they're just thinking ooh, how many seats do I sell of this? And what will be the price tag underneath and all these wonderful things? Nothing against that. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, that's also something that the post-sales guys, the consultants, don't do. Right? Because it's already decided. A client made up their mind and said, yeah, this is exactly what I need, and give me 2 pounds of that and give me 5 pounds of that. And you create that custom mix for them.
Yeah. And I think there's a combination of representing for the technology solution that you have to sell, mm-hmm. because, solution engineers are kind of like salespeople in the sense that oftentimes they're evaluated based off of their contribution towards financial gain to the company.
Oh yeah, and they get commission and everything. Yeah,
exactly. But it's not as serious as salespeople. Oftentimes, salespeople are much more heavily commissioned. So solution engineers do have less of a component of their job that is entirely reliant, or their compensation is entirely reliant on the sale going through. And so, in a lot of ways, solution engineers have to maintain a technical authority. Mm-hmm. So if your solution doesn't work for a client, it is not to your career advantage to try and sell them something that's not going to work for them, because your credibility as an engineer is one of your strongest assets. So where a salesperson might say, hey, let's sell them, 10 units of X, 5 units of Y, a solution engineer might say, I think that this deal or this opportunity doesn't fit into our technology stack in this way. And even if they would buy that, I think that this would be a bad move for us to do, and I can't stand behind this. Now, does it mean the sale doesn't go through? Absolutely not. People want to make money. But solution engineers do have that level of personal technical integrity that has them better advocating for the client. So there's sort of like I thought some think of them as a sort of a pre-CSM. So they're a customer success manager before it's a customer. So maybe a PSM, a prospect success manager, because they're trying to advocate for the prospect and their technical needs. Actually, I like that. A PSM.
Yeah. Well, you know that I had that role also for a couple of years. And I had the situation where I was in calls with clients, and I told the client, you don't need what we have. That's not what you need. You need an ERP system. So go to the SAPs and Oracles and Dynamics of the world and buy one of those. That didn't make me a lot of friends with our sales guys, because they, at some point in the quarter, most likely towards the end of the quarter, they're a little bit desperate, So they obviously want to make their sale. But I think you're absolutely right. It's your integrity that's on the line here to say, yep, what is the right thing that we recommend to clients?
And when we talk about the actual work that they do, some of them the biggest time, let's talk about time sinks you expect from a solution engineer.
Yeah.
Things you can rely on them where they're going to put the effort in. So one of the things that I gotta say takes a huge amount of my time when they come up, and Roland, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, is they are usually the ones who are answering the technical questions on RFIs, RFPs, whatever, RFX, like all the formal proposal requests for information, requests for proposal that a company might issue to get bidders to take that technology business. And because they have expertise in the platform, they're the ones who are most likely to be able to answer those questions comprehensively at a level that is sure less than maybe the product management or R&D, but that's not their focus. Product management and R&D often don't have anything to do or very little to do with those sorts of very tactical sales opportunities and formal request answering. So that's something that the solution engineer, you can rely on them to do that. And I mean, obviously don't overwhelm them with them, but it's very common for me to get RFIs or RFPs that have 100 to 200 questions we have to answer, and usually for make sure that it's given to them in things like Excel, something they can very easily answer, or something they don't have to go and type in a system. Normally we do is we keep like documents that are shared among everyone, so they can go and edit each other's stuff, and that's something that's work you can just count on, because that's something that they're both good at, something that's part of their job description, and something they have the technical expertise to be able to help shape. That's one of the things they also do is they if you give them access early enough in the deal cycle, a solution engineer can help to shape the RFI that comes out or the RFP that comes out. I know that a lot of consulting companies, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, will write RFPs, or companies will, or just any general company might buy an RFP template off of somebody. When you see that RFP, and if there's an opportunity for a negotiation, a solution engineer can be your best friend, because what they can do is go in and say, I see you've asked question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down to question 73. Nowhere in those 73 questions do I see you asking about some of the things that we see as part of a solution that would help you address your biggest challenges. Can I propose question 74, 5, 6, and 7, and 8? These are things those 5 questions, and it's not a huge amount, but I think it makes a big difference for you. And when you can do that, there's an expression in the industry called wiring an RFP or wiring an RFI. That's when you take a normal request and you couch it in the language and capabilities of a single provider. In some ways, that's something as a salesperson you'd love to see, because it means they're most likely going to buy from you. But they're not just wiring it because they want to wire it to your technology. What they're doing is they're trying to align it with the best practices that they believe in. And yes, they're working at that company because that company offers technology that can help realize those best practices. So they're really good at shaping. So if you can get them in early, they can do both the pre-work on the RFP, and they can answer the eventual RFP that comes out.
Yeah, you're right, JM. But there's also the other thing when clients, and I have seen that once or twice, they just send out a multi-page document or spreadsheet or whatever and come up with standard questions.
Right.
And most likely they're asking for this because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. And I had situations at one of my previous employers. We were selling a process management and an IT architecture tool. And then they had some buzzwords in there like, oh, the tool that we want to acquire must support BPMN or must support Archimate or whatever. And obviously the logical step was, oh, they're asking for the process tool because they're looking for process stuff.
Yeah.
And then when we were talking with them, it was techies who just heard some buzzwords and threw it into the RFP, and they needed to get some education and say, yeah, we do that, but we do that with our process tool. But I think what you want is our IT architecture tool,
Yeah.
and that fits you much better. But that is one thing where a solution engineer, and just to be very clear, clients don't reach out to solution engineers directly.
Correct.
They talk with the sales guy. So the biggest thing that you can do is have a good connection to your sales guy, build a reputation with him, and have him bring you in very quickly so that you have the chance to do this. And unfortunately, I've seen enough situations where you got that spreadsheet literally thrown over the fence and says, oh, by the way, I need it by tomorrow. And it's completely out of context and you don't know what's going on and what the client wants, or you even haven't spoken with the client. So that's typically a recipe for disaster.
Speaking of things thrown over the fence, another thing, and you talked about it a little bit at the beginning, is throwing a demo over the fence. So that's one thing that you'll see a lot of solution engineers responsible for, which is demonstrating the platforms that they represent for. So they're the ones who are going to be running the technical demonstrations for your end users, your functional users, your business leaders, and they'll also be the ones helping to shape the art of the possible and doing a sort of a reduced or simplified overview demo for executive leadership. Now, throwing a demo over the fence is also not a welcome thing. Please don't do that to your solution engineers.
Oh, no,
They
don't.
need to have enough information and context to be able to tailor that demo so that it matters most to the people who are at the other end of the line. So they need to know who the audience is. They need to know what the use cases are. Hopefully, they've been involved in the account this whole time, so they've got relationships. They're able to draw on those. You want to run dry runs to make sure that this demo is going to land with your internal champions. Like, there's lots of different components, but I don't know how many times people throw the thing over to you, Roland, and like, hey, just show them how it works.
Yeah, and what you also see is if you have an experienced solution engineer, they just do that in their sleep, right? And you can tell because it's boring as heck, because they're given that 200 times and they're not really vested into this. While if you get that hairy beast as an objective, then as a solution engineer, you have something to put your teeth in there. And one thing that I found very, very a good thing, I don't know how you do that, JM, but I like to use, things like Microsoft Whiteboard or Google Whiteboard or Jam or how it's called, those free flow or Mural, those free flowing tools. And I literally was thinking about, okay, what's the story that I want to tell? Not in the demo, but also later in POCs, POVs. What's the story? And I took screenshots. I said, oh, that's what they're asking for. So I structured it in those sections, and then I took screenshots and I said, oh, from here we go to this screen or we go to that screen, to tell the story. And you wouldn't be surprised how many salespeople in those dry runs first understood the technology that they were supposed to sell, because they've seen this. And I highly recommend to be part of it. If you're an SE, of course, do it. But if you're a client, you want to be part of that creative process, right? And be involved. And there's nothing that stops you to say, hey, can I work with your solution engineer so that we make sure that the demo for my stakeholders will be perfect, and it will hit all the things? Because from, I don't know what the percentage is. I would say half of the clients who asked us to do a demo, they didn't care. They just showed up. Yeah. And maybe 30% did something like a mini dry run, but it was also very passive. And then 20% were actually involved in creating a solution in that creative process that we just spoke about.
Well, when I was growing up, one of the things my mother first taught me was that you don't really have clients. If you have clients, you're trying to sell transactions.
Yeah.
Then That's all you're ever going to have. But if you have partners and you view everyone as sort of a collaborative working person, then what you can do is build something really cool with them. That's a solution that works for both people. So, and by the way, you did mention working with solution engineers. If you have a salesperson, you're a sales representative you're talking to, ask to work with their solution engineers. That's one thing that solution engineers are distinctly, which is not billable. And that's a very cool thing. Like, what we'll talk about later, money might change hands, but for, even proofs of concept, those sorts of things we talked about before, those for most organizations, those are offered for free. And prep for demos, dry runs, those things are, for the most part, and they should really be, those are free. And so use those solution engineers at no cost to you, but to get a huge amount of benefit as you make your very important decision.
But to put the other bookend on it, they're also not free consultants, right?
Yes.
And you and I, JM, you and I spoke about that in the what makes a good POC, POV topic. A POC, POV is a technical process as part of the sales process, right?
Yes.
You want to show that either your technology works, the POC, or you want to show that you can create the value, the POV, out of it, but it's not a replacement for a full-blown project at the end of the day after the sale. So that is one thing just to keep in mind. Obviously, there's a limited amount of time and a limited scope that solution engineers support.
Also remember that your POC and POV are not training opportunities. They're opportunities for you to try it out, play with it a little bit, but they are not official training. And I see a lot of folks running into that wall real hard. Make sure you actually get training after the fact so you're able to do what you want to in the platform at the level that you need to with a full-blown implementation.
Or before, right? So I know a couple of vendors who obviously have e-learning offerings that you can go and do the training beforehand, right? So check with your SE and say, hey, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn about your platform so that I can have the intelligent conversation with you? But maybe moving on, JM.
Yes.
Now we said, what does a SE do? And maybe just to repeat it, is a technical sales specialist that's non-billable, as JM pointed out, and typically is used in 4 phases of the sales process: the deal qualification, RFI and RFP supports, technical demos, and POCs and POVs. Right. And after that, well, then you have other people, to onboard customers, to do full-blown projects and whatnot. So the solution engineer is also not your consultant on call if you want.
Well, that leads us to our first break of the show. Because we've gone through a little bit of these things, we'd like to leave you with a couple of minutes of music and an opportunity to think about it. Are you a solution engineer? Do you know any friendly solution engineers? Where have you worked with them before? Where have you struggled to get what you need from them? And now that you know a little bit more about them, how do you look forward to working with them in the future to help solve the problems you're facing and build a better way for your organization? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our second section, all about consulting.
All right, welcome back. JM, let's move on. So we spoke about what a solution engineer does and what a solution engineer doesn't do. So talk to me a little bit about what happens then after the sale, and why did Roland say that the pre-sales person, the solution engineer, is not your private consultant?
It's because, my friend, and hopefully everyone out there hears this very strongly, solution engineering is designed as pre-sales. We talked about that at the beginning, but I want to reinforce that here. They may have similar knowledge sets, they might have similar approaches, but when it comes to actually implementing your technology solution, your business solution, your new framework, your new processes, that falls to the role of a consultant. Consultants are used usually post-sale as part of your realization of the project that you're creating value with and the implementation and use of the technology that you have purchased. And Roland, I know you've got a ton of experience with consulting. So talk to me a little bit about, let's talk about how this differs and why a solution engineering consultant have very distinct roles and very distinct different sort of focuses and skill sets.
Yeah. So first of all, let me say this. If you're a client listening to this and you're now convinced that you need a JM in your life, like I do, then I think you're missing somewhat the boat, right? Because when we're talking about the software that you buy from a vendor, there will be implementation services in some form or fashion, right? And you should insist that this will not be scoped by the solution engineer or will not be scoped by the salesperson. Because at least I have, and I'm pretty sure every consultant under the sun had the same experience, that the salesperson told the client whatever they wanted to hear to make the deal and promised them everything. And then you're standing there and you say, oh, how do I deliver this now? Which is obviously a bad situation, not only for you as the individual, but also for the organization that you represent, because you should actually talk with each other. So the better run organizations act in a way that they say, okay, we do a little separate exercise from the license sale, right? We have our consultants come in, be part of the sales process, but they do all the scoping. They do all the definition of deliverables and definition of the activities. And of course, also the cost, the effort and the cost that comes with it. And you as a client, you should actually ask for that. Give me the license quote and give me the services quote, right? And then, and only then, once you signed, you already know who's going to deliver on your project, because that's also a good question that I would recommend. Ask in your RFPs, who's going to be your key personnel? And I've seen customers who came in and had in the contract a statement written in there that they must agree if key personnel will be changed for whatever reason, right? So they wanted to make sure to lock in the people that they build up a relationship with during the sales process, and they got warm and fuzzy feelings that they can deliver the outcomes that they want.
And I think that the key part here is something we talked about a little bit in the QA episode, which is the idea of moving left. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've seen a lot of projects really struggle when the technical handover was fairly far after the sale. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to pass over documents, you're trying to make introductions. Whereas conversely, I've seen a lot of really successful implementations where you move this left. The technical handover happens during the pre-sales process. And that's a very useful tool to be able to get the right scoping for your scope of work for the consulting. And as you said, the right quote, as you said, the right team in place. So day one isn't like a hard shift from second gear to fifth gear. You're already at fourth gear. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. But also keep in mind, there's a third group that is involved. And those are the guys who do the actual technical provisioning. You might call them cloud ops or whatever, right? Because when you go and buy a software that's obviously hosted somewhere, in good organization, it's as automated as possible. Give me your email and your 16 digits of your credit card and we send you access information. But in all reality, most likely there will be other people being involved, like setting up single sign-ons and all those wonderful stuff on the technical plumbing side that needs to be done. So 3 players. Right. You have your salesperson who actually does all the document wrangling and whatnot. And with him, you have the solution engineer who figured out what's best for you. And with him, you have your services people who sell the services to you. But then you have that intermediate phase before the project starts where the cloud ops team will provide and provision the technology, right? That might take a couple of days depending on what you buy and how complex it is, right? Or if you want to have it on-prem, guess what? Maybe that's part of your license sale that the on-prem installation is included or not, right? So these are all things you want to look for before you start your project, because what is the project that you want to do? You want to generate value, right? And for that, you have different type of people that come in. And we will talk about the required skill sets between a consultant and a solution engineer to close the bridge here. So when I look at consultant resources, right, I typically see 3 things where consultants come in. So one is they have a specialization, right? That could be a tool specialization, That could be a process specialization. That could be an industry specialization, in a way that they are on the hook for delivering those outcomes. And then the second skill that I see is, and coming back to that, it's not technology sales, it's people, right?
Yep.
Is facilitation and change management.
Oh, yeah.
You need to be able to build up a relationship to your customer, because at the end of the day, my true belief, people buy people, right? And if you fail, if you can't do this, then most likely you don't make the sales, you don't have a successful project because somebody doesn't like you. Mm-hmm. And then the last one, which is obviously absolutely different than the pre-sales guys, is you need to have skills in project and program management.
Right.
You need to deliver on time and in budget and whatnot. There's no doubt about it, because otherwise your business model doesn't work, right? If you need whatever, you said 100 days, but you need 120 days, so 20% over, well, guess what? That might be your margin, right? And then your bosses ask you, why did you do that? My kids are hungry too. They want to have food on the table. So that's definitely a different thing. And lastly, I think everything that a consultant does for you is already scoped out. A good project manager will insist on the scope of the work, the process that you've agreed on, doing scope management, so that you don't have that thing that the scope is creeping and you deliver more than a client might have bought or whatever, the demands come up. So a good consultant or a good program manager, they also need to say no. And they need to draw a line in the set and say, oh yeah, that's great that you're interested in that, but that's not what we agreed on. And it doesn't work out for us, but we're happy to do a second phase of this project, and let's assemble requirements for that second phase.
Absolutely. And that's really important, being able to compartmentalize, like say, listen, I'd like to do this, but this was scoped out in this way. I'm going to hold to this.
Yeah.
Project and program management is so important.
It's like you bring your car into the garage, because your radiator leaks water, right? And you go in there, and a good mechanic will not only fix your radiator, but they will also do a quick checkup of your car and say, oh, by the way, your tires, well, you might get another 5,000 miles out of them, and your brakes don't look good either. And when was the last time you've changed your oil, And some people might see this as a bland approach to sell more services, right? Like, oh, it's super important, whatever, right?
No.
But a lot of people are appreciative of this, right? As they should be. Like, oh yeah, I showed you something. And sometimes you have mechanics who just do stuff because it's the right thing to do, and they just don't tell clients that they did it.
That's nice. I mean, here's the thing. I think of that as a similar professional responsibility. As a solution engineer, you're trying to define the right solution for the company. Mm-hmm. As a consultant, you're trying to iterate on that and look back and say, like, what's working, what isn't working, what else do I see here? Because within your professional capabilities, you might be able to understand the interconnectivity between that technology and initiatives, the technology and different business units and their needs. And when you can say, hey, listen, I actually have some ideas on how this could get better. I can see where you're struggling. That's a really powerful force for good. So trust your consultants. They're not always, or not just trying to sell you more services. What they really are trying to do is make you more successful. And that's something that I have to say to literally everybody else that I talk to. I don't really care if you buy a platform if it's going to make you unhappy. Mm-hmm. Like if you give me a bunch of money, if you like buy all the technology off the shelf that my company offers, that's fine. But if you're unhappy afterwards, that's a complete failure. The failure wasn't the dollars. The failure was the value. And that's something that I think the same thing happens with consultants. Their end goal is you being successful in operating what they're trying to build. If that's not happening, then that's a failure. So that's why we say it's always about, they're not trying to upsell you services. They're trying to make sure that you're successful. I just wanted to add one more note. Oftentimes we see this sort of confusion or conflation between consulting and training. Mm-hmm. Consultants often act as training resources. So there is sort of a part of their facilitation component, which is about structured education services. Sometimes it's bundled with consulting, sometimes it isn't. But you note that a lot of consultants are very good trainers. It just sort of happens to be a cross skill set. The other thing I wanted to mention here is, you mentioned earlier about the idea of having consultants brought in early as part of scope of work for the consulting services to go along with the implementation. I have to take a moment here to reinforce that, and I can't reinforce this more strongly. When you purchase technology, purchase services. Great question. Why? Because when you buy technology, you are not buying a solution. What you're doing is buying a software. The solution is what emerges from the practice of using that software. And that could come along with, way of working changes in the organization. That's we talked about change management. That could come along with education, so upskilling your resources. That could come along with strategic alignment, which is the facilitation and then having projects, having initiatives that are all on the same wavelength as the organization. Like, you need to build the right environment within which this technology can grow and this practice can grow. Otherwise, it's going to sit fallow or it's just going to die. And so services aren't an afterthought for technology sales. I'm talking to you sales guys out there. It's not an afterthought. It can't be. It is part of the package that makes a company successful.
Oh yeah, and I'm obviously biased because I'm managing the professional service arms in the firm that I'm working here. I wholeheartedly agree, even though we see training as part of services, right? And one could argue, we're creating e-learnings and all that stuff. Is that still a service when you provide this? Right. Versus there's obviously no doubt when you have an instructor-led training and somebody does the sing and dance in front of a group that this is a service. But yeah, there's a blurry line. But JM, let's talk a little bit about the required skill sets that a solution engineer, which is actually the topic of today's call, that they should bring to the fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does a solution engineer have to know or have to be able to do? Well, generally, it's a spectrum, but I hope that solution engineers have some form of industry expertise. It doesn't have to necessarily be a vertical, like, you're a deep expert in banking and insurance or something like that. But having expertise on methodologies, having expertise on frameworks, having expertise on best practices around adoption of platforms, like you want to be some sort of expertise that you can bring in to help contextualize the conversation you're having around the acquisition of a platform. Because you want to couch it in reality. You also want to bring a sort of a best practice authenticity, and that comes from learning. You read a lot of books, listen to what best practice people are saying, like be able to bring that knowledge to people. So having that expertise is really important. Similar to consultant, solution engineers need to know their platforms. So tool specialization, but it's a little bit of a different spin instead of necessarily having the implementation skills. So that might involve some sort of heavily technical configuration or sometimes customization of tools, and the ability to code and the ability to do very, very detailed work. Oftentimes it's about knowing the platform and the art of the possible. And that's what you're communicating on as you're going through the sales process, as you're going through that sort of cycle of awareness and the cycle of agreement, and then the buying cycle.
Yeah, and I agree. It's you need to be able to show, if your tool doesn't do this, what the customer is asking in detail, you need to be able to show them something similar and explain that using this or that or doing this or that will create the result that the client is looking for, if that's not part of a POC.
Absolutely.
But there are also some skills that are outside of that. And I think nobody will disagree with what you said, JM. Industry expertise and tool specialization are obviously two important things. But when I look further on, there's a couple of skills that I don't see in a lot of SEs, which I find baffling, and one of them is media creation and media editing, like you and I are talking into microphones and creating a podcast, or creating a video or whatever, being able to communicate clearly, I think is the key. And today, all of those multimedia technologies are virtually free, right? You can do that without asking anyone with your desktop tools. So this is very, very interesting that a lot of people don't do this. So that's one way how you can distinguish yourselves.
Yeah.
And having said that, if you think a little bit further, I mentioned this as part of communications, also public speaking. You know, sometimes you see a solution engineer being called in for a company webinar. Oh yeah, we have that new stuff that we want to sell you. And now we have Jim Bob who just shows you our software, and that person is super bored and clicks through a couple of slides and gives 2 minutes of a demo. That's a missed opportunity, right?
Yes.
Have your solution engineers, have them build a presence in a room, talking with and to people, bring them on the stage so that they don't have stage fright and all that type of stuff, and evolve into a good public speaker. I think that's a very important thing, and clients will love you, right? If you're an SE who has those skills.
I talk about the difference between two types of public speaking communication. One is to inform people, and one is to impart to people. Mm-hmm. End result from what did I take away in my little handout that I got is the same. But the way we get there is very different, and the long tail of the effect is very different. To inform people is to simply give them the information that you know in whatever way you need to. So you tell them the things you know, and now they know them too. Mm-hmm. Imparting to somebody is a level of presentation and emotion that doesn't tell them what you know. It makes them feel how you feel. Mm-hmm. And if you're excited about a technology, if you really believe in that practice, if you see its success and you know that it's going to work for a lot of people and that they can get the value, they can feel satisfied, they can grow in their own organization and their organization can thrive for it. If you can make them feel how you feel, that's the pinnacle of solution engineering, to impart, not to inform.
Yeah, and I don't want to say this in these days, but that's exactly the point. You need to be viral, right? You need to show your excitement of what you're doing, and that should infect your customers. So they should be super duper pumped up to buy your technology, right? In Absolutely. A genuine way. So not like, doing a big show. The other thing that obviously a solution engineer needs to bring to the table, and we spoke about that, is relation management, right? Relationships. You need to build up a relationship similar to consultants, people by people. Give your client the warm and fuzzies. They need to trust you. And then last but not least, there is also a little bit of basic project management that a solution engineer needs to do. When you think about a larger proof of concept or proof of value, those sometimes can be real mini projects, not up to a production level, but you also need to do all the shepherding, invite clients, hold them honest, get your acts in a row, bring in people, track the deliverables, and all those things that a good project manager does within the given time frame of the proof of concept, because the clients have a date in mind when they want to make the decision. So it's your job to drive the POC to that point successfully so that the client has enough time not only to evaluate what you did, but also to socialize it with their stakeholders, right? And say, oh yeah, we saw the POCs with company X and company Y, and yeah, it's awesome. Company X had exactly what we need, and you built the relationship with them.
There is much more of a focus on the strategic when it comes to solution engineering, particularly when you think about solution engineering earlier in the process. They're trying to shape ideation. They're trying to shape practice. They're trying to shape the organization that's about to receive a new way of working. That's really important.
Yeah, I think this is, I would label as, you have to be a structured thinker.
Yes.
You not only have to look at what's the next deliverable that I have to produce to follow the sales process, but you also have to understand how all those different parts work together. And then, like I said, when we talk about project management, you have to bring it to that close. But there's one thing that you typically don't see in a job description, which I think is absolutely crucial for a solution engineer. And that is, you need to be a decent person.
Aww.
Right? Because at the end of the day, and I said it before, people buy people, right? And you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver and all that type of stuff, but you also don't want to be that guy. You want to work a trustful relationship with your clients so that it's a good outcome for both of you.
Absolutely, Roland. I couldn't agree more. And hopefully everyone has had a chance to take a look at a little bit of what it takes to become a consultant, what it takes to be a great solution engineer. And that's focused between consulting on the tool specialization, facilitation and change management, and sometimes training, project and program management, often with budgeting and the full-blown project management that makes it happen, versus more of the solution engineers, industry expertise, their art of the possible tool specialization, and their additional skills that we expect from them. The folks who are making media, creating and editing videos, and sort of asynchronous content that people can access, communications and public speaking, becoming the face of a platform, the ability to impart to an audience what it means to be successful with that, and then managing stakeholder relationships throughout, as well as the logistics of the POCs and POVs and the plan to make a decision and close. That's a lot of different skills you bring together as a solution engineer, but you can see how there's a little bit of a difference with the consultants. And hopefully we'll leave you with a brief question to think about. When have you seen a resource and you weren't sure whether or not they were pre-sales and solution engineering or consulting? Do you now know? Do you see now what their specialization was? And think about yourself now. What kind of resources do you need right now? Are you looking for consulting support to see those implementations successful? Or are you thinking about pre-sales and solution engineering to help determine what's going to work best for you? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our third section, I think our final section, the meaning and our close for the episode.
So, welcome back, JM. Now that we worked out the differences between pre and post sales, talk to me a little bit about, how do you work with pre-sales then?
That's a great question. So we're going to talk about sort of when to contact people, what information they need, and what sort of things you can expect from them. This is kind of a summary of what you heard before, but also just let's make it structured. So when to contact pre-sales. Pre-sales are a great option to bring in essentially right after customer first contact. If you're an inbound sales rep, you're getting calls and you hear something, bring in pre-sales to help you to put it into a category of technology you sell or qualify it out. So it's great at very early stages of opportunity qualification. You could also bring in pre-sales as part, or solution engineering as part of awareness campaigns. So if you're in marketing and you want to get your word out, it's a great opportunity to bring really experienced consultant style people to come in and help you for free to build out your marketing material. And then another great place to bring them in is, once you've got your discovery calls, if you're looking to sell in a discovery call, this is a person that you can have on the line to ask the great questions that you might need to dig deeper and start to build the right solution around them. And then they're going to help shepherd things through the process from a technical perspective, helping to get that quote unquote technical win by showcasing the platforms, helping to connect it with the customer use cases and strategic direction, and showing things in things like a POC or POV if necessary, answering RFIs along the way. So contact them early, bring them into the process. They'll let you know if they don't have the time for this sort of thing. You can also asynchronously send them information, so you can just give them information sheets or notes, and they can respond back, here's what I think, but trust them because they've got really good information. What do they need? The first thing they need is they need information on the customer. What are their use cases? What do they come to you with? Or what did you go out to them and get back from them? Hey, this is something we're actually looking at. So what are they focused on? Any additional assets or information you have about the competitive landscape. So what are they doing today? How does their team look? And where are they struggling? So what are the specific pain points that you're looking to solve? These are really good sets of information that you can give to your pre-sales resource, as well as all the relationships and introduce them to the right players so they can use their relationship charm to help drive forward that opportunity. And what can you expect from them? Great information. They can help contextualize things. Please believe them when they say things. They can validate your opportunities to say, hey, this is a good thing, or maybe this isn't really for us. They can help to drive forward some easy next steps. So here are some things I've done in the past to help convince, to help bring people together around a solution. They'll help support you by presenting things with you and not just for you, with you, as they'll do a lot of the demonstrations, custom demos, POCs and POVs, help to sort of create what we call the readouts of the presentation, which we've talked about in this podcast before, to show you what the outcomes were and then connect those back with your senior stakeholders so they can see the proof that this is the right plan for them. So contact them as early as possible. Give them all the information they need from a customer perspective, from a use case perspective, and get from them lots of really good information back, some qualifications, and some really great work to help go through the deal cycle in a way that makes you successful as somebody trying to convince people to purchase technology. Roland, how do you work with consultants? Talk about the opposite side of the coin.
Well, as we said before, I think when you want to get involved with the service people or with the consultants in the organization, that could be very, very early in the sales cycle. And you mentioned it before. I've seen as well organizations who use their consultants to write the RFPs and RFIs. So you might, as early as possible, go to this if you're working with a services-only provider. But if you're talking to the services organization with your vendor, you want to get your sales people being aware that you want to talk to their consultants as early as possible. You know, once you got a good understanding of the technology and the question comes up not about the what, but the how, then you want to ask for the people who you work with in your future project, right? So move left, shift left, right? And you also might want to involve your consultants whenever you have to make a decision on your platform, even before the sale or after the sale, because those are the guys who've done that for years and years in the trenches. You know, they know what the tool can do or cannot do and what best practices are when you do something. And then when you think about what do consultants need, right, to give you either a good quote or deliver a good project to you. And the first one is obviously the needs. You know, JM said use cases, right? I would expand that a little bit more, you know, because what you actually want to look for is what's the value that you want to create, or what are the outcomes, the tangible outcomes that a project should create, so that you as the client can take those things and move on after the consultant has left. The second thing that a consultant needs to know is obviously existing decisions that you might have made, you know, and they might be very obvious for you, Mr. Client. The consultant who got brought into that opportunity or is new on the project just doesn't know, right? And it's a good project management activity to obviously maintain a decision log. The other thing that a consultant needs to know is obviously not only his team or her team and the skill set with that, but obviously also your team, Mr. Client, right? To say, okay, who do we work with, right? And if you have a good relationship, you would also ask the same questions. You know, what do I have to look for when dealing with that person? Because not everybody is 100% on top of their game every day, you know? So there's also the situation that you say, ooh, take this person with a grain of salt. And then when you think about the project management aspect, of course, you need to understand what are the timelines, you know, and figure out, okay, what do I have to deliver? How are those things all wired up with each other that I need to deliver, right? And then maybe to close the gap or the bridge, if you will, between solution engineers and consultants, guess what? In my experience, and JM, I'm pretty sure you agree with that, and your dear listeners, if you haven't noticed yourself, the better SEs have been consultants before, you know, because where do you learn all your stuff? Where do you learn all those interpersonal skills that we mentioned when we were talking in the previous segment about the skills? You learn it by being in the trenches. So what organizations should do is they should think about what is the career path for a solution engineer, right? Why should a consultant switch to the dark side, if you will, right? And go into solution engineering. And by the way, what is the career over there, right? Yeah. Is it that you become the director of solution engineering, you know, or what? What is the end game, right? So anyways, I just want to say, the better SEs have been consultants before.
Well, listen, we've got lots of folks in line, hopefully, who have a recognition of that. And some of you who are consultants today, maybe solution engineering might be in your future. If you're a solution engineer who was a consultant before, hey, welcome to the club. Mm-hmm. It's a little tacit validation from us over here at What's Your Baseline. And speaking about that, I wanted to say thank you so much to our wonderful, wonderful listeners. We're going to close out the episode today. This was a very personal episode to both Roland and I, who have been solution engineers, who have been consultants. These are a big part of our life and livelihood, and I'm glad we got a chance to explain it a little bit to those who may or may not know how that all works. If you have any questions, of course, you can contact us, but this time we'd like to ask you a special favor. If you wouldn't mind recommending this podcast to 5 folks you know who might find this information interesting, we would love to see it. We're at about 1,000 people liking us right now on LinkedIn. We'd love to have even more following, even more subscribing, even more folks as part of the What's Your Baseline community. And of course, if you want to find out more about What's Your Baseline, you can go to what'syourbaseline.com, or for this episode specifically, what'syourbaseline.com/episode 38. Well, friends, it's been a lot of fun. And for that time, I've been J.M. Erlinson.
And my name is Roland Wold.
And we will see you in the next one.